This week, Nevada will weigh in on the presidential election. The state will run primaries for Democrats and Republicans on Tuesday. Then the Nevada GOP will host its own caucus on Thursday.
Well, Fox 12 Washington correspondent Josh Rotenberg joins us now live from Las Vegas. And Josh, why are both types of contests happening and what can we expect?
Well, good evening, Riel and Pete. Nevada does things unlike any other state in the United States. So they're going to have primaries and caucuses. Nobody else does that. And this basically circles back to 3 years ago when the state passed a law to say that they were going to transfer from caucuses to primaries. But there was a loophole in that law that said while the state has to run primaries, the parties can decide how they want to award their delegates. So Nevada Republicans are doing things differently on Thursday. But let's talk about tomorrow first. On the Democratic side, a lot less drama. President Biden likely to win the Democratic primary, and he is going to pocket 49 Democratic delegates towards the Democratic nomination. Nikki Haley is going to participate in the primary tomorrow night, but if she wins, she gets 0 delegates. On Thursday, Donald Trump is going to take part in the Nevada Republican Party caucus. And if he wins that, then he secures the 26 Republican delegates for the state of Nevada. So with that said, if Nikki Haley wins tomorrow, the only thing she gets is bragging rights. This is basically in the bag for Donald Trump.
Well, meantime, after months of negotiating, a bipartisan group of senators has finally unveiled its national security supplemental package. The $118 billion plan calls for aid to Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and it also makes dramatic changes to policy at the U.S. southern border. What more can you tell us about what's in this proposal?
Well, Pete, it would do all of those things if it was ever going to get across the finish line. And I can just tell you, reporting tonight that we're getting from Capitol Hill, it's not looking good. But let's talk about what's actually in this proposal. Months of negotiations, bipartisan negotiations, $118 billion, $60 billion for Ukraine, 14 for Israel, 10 for Gaza, 5 for Taiwan, and then 12 to overhaul the country's asylum process. Now, as far as severely restricting who actually could get asylum, taking down the amount of time for adjudications from years to 6 months, and then also giving the president the ability to shut down the border if there are 5,000 migrants that cross in a given day. With that said, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, the leaders of the Senate, were hoping that the moderates would come together to pass this bill out of the Senate. But we just learned behind closed doors that Mitch McConnell is actually now encouraging Republicans in the Senate to vote against this bill when it's going to get put on the floor come Wednesday. So we already knew the House wasn't in favor of this, but now apparently the Senate Republicans aren't either.
Okay, so now what has been the reaction from the House and the White House?
So, look, the White House has been involved in these negotiations, and President Biden has said that he strongly supports this. And he called on House Republicans to say, do you actually want to solve this crisis or do you want to play political games? Those were his words. But House Speaker Mike Johnson has insisted that if this bill ever got to the House, it would be dead on arrival. Now, the one thing Mike Johnson is going to do this week is he is going to put a bill on the floor that is $18 billion worth of aid for Israel and Israel alone without conditions. Now, we don't know how Democrats feel about this, but because this is not going through the committee process, it's going to take 2/3 of the House of Representatives, which means Democrats, in order to pass this. But we did learn from President Biden tonight through a statement that if that bill ended up on his desk, he would veto it. So with that said, Congress and the White House are not on the same page.
Well, in related foreign policy news, Secretary of State Blinken is back in the Middle East after a weekend of retaliatory strikes from the U.S. against Iranian-backed militants. What's the purpose of this trip?
Well, look, this is his 5th trip to the Middle East since October 7th when Hamas carried out those deadly terrorist attacks against the Israeli people. And so now he's trying to prevent wider escalation in the Middle East. And so he was with the Crown Prince today in Saudi Arabia, but he's also now trying to work on a hostage deal to try to get those Israelis freed from Gaza, trying to get aid into Gaza for the Palestinian civilians, and then also trying to figure out what Gaza looks like after the Israel-Hamas war actually ends. So Blinken's got a tall task in front of him here. He's got a week-long trip here, and then obviously we'll keep track of his progress once he gets back.
Okay, Fox 12 Washington correspondent Josh Rotenberg, thank you so much for joining us live from Las Vegas tonight.
Thanks, Josh.